If you're someone who dreams to move to New York and see what that's like, then today's guest is perfect for you. So Quintin grew up in Toronto and we knew each other since university. He's an amazing growth marketer, and like many people who's live in Toronto, you feel like sometimes you grow out of the city, right? If you want to be really ambitious, if you want to do something really cool in the startup scene, you really feel like San Francisco, LA, or New York might be the way to go. So he spent a couple of months in each of those cities and decided to settle down in New York. He loves the energy and especially the people there and how you can find his own community. So if you're someone who's curious what it's like to move out of the city that you grew up in into a brand new one, how to find your people, how to find your community, this is probably the perfect episode for you. So enjoy.
But like we've known each other for how many years now?
Or
For two, like 1 year when I was a L'Oreal, 2 years to one. Like it's about 4 years
yeah,
since we've known each other.
yeah.
And then like you've always been like a big mentor to me. You've helped like you literally changed my life, right? Like I mention you a lot when I tell people like my origin story and like like how I got into growth marketing, all that stuff. So but I feel like we've known each other a lot and like we know bits and pieces of each other's story, like the big plot lines. But then I guess we haven't like it's cool because like we haven't gotten the chance to like dive a little deeper and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess like tell me. What I'm really curious to know is like, okay, one of the interesting parts is I feel like you're one of the only people I know that actually moved to New York, right? Like out of everyone at Schulich, out of everyone like from these years, or just people I know in generally in Toronto, making the move to New York is probably one of the hardest things you can do, right? It's so fucking expensive. It's so hard to find a job that will sponsor you.
As a Canadian.
But then like, so I've been in New York like 4 times in the last 2 years. Every single time that I go, I'm like, yo, this is a real vibe. Like if I could, I think I would want to try to move here. Like it is really different, the energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, tell me about like what was the moment that you knew like, yo, I'm going to New York. Like, fuck Toronto.
I feel like the moment I knew was actually like 6 months before I actually ended up moving.
Yeah.
So like in COVID, I like was staying in Toronto during lockdown, and it was actually very depressing being there. And I didn't know later why I felt depressed, but a lot of it was actually because like I have like this feeling of like stagnancy. I think being Asian, being stagnant is like the worst thing to happen because it's always like
you're degrading.
Yeah, I feel like degrading and just like rotting away if you're not making progress. Because like so much of like my like where I got affirmations from like family and friends was like, oh, like you're doing so well, you're moving up in job. And I think especially as an Asian, it's really hard to like not have that. So like looking back at it now and having done therapy, like that was a large part of it. So I do feel like a bit of language there, and I knew that I need to get out. So then that's when my best friend at the time was in San Francisco, and he actually ended up breaking up with his girlfriend at that time. And he was like, yo, just come to San Francisco. I was like, I don't think it's a good idea. Like COVID's still out. But then we did the math together, and we're like, okay, like it's actually safer in San Francisco than to be in Toronto. Yeah. So I was like, a week before I like booked my flight, I was like, hey, I'm coming to San Francisco. I went over, stayed in one of his roommates' place when his roommate was gone. And then I did 2 months in San Francisco to check out the vibe. 2 months in LA to check out the vibe. And during that time, I was like, I want to move to I want to get out of Toronto, but like, where are the cities I want to settle down in?
So like, you knew you wanted to get out of Toronto because you felt like things were a bit more stagnant here. Did you feel like, like, I guess it's like opportunity.
Yeah.
Is it also like, I guess the people too, right? Like if you want to dream a bit bigger, and if you want to, like if you want to be where everyone is, like it has to be New York, LA, or SF sort of thing, right?
It was very much like just things are bigger, right? Like, like one thing I learned from a podcast recently called the Diary of the CEO. Was like, it's less about like your skill set, it's more about the market that you're showcasing your skill set in. And in that example, he was talking about how like he was marketing, he was doing art marketing for LVMH, a lot of these fashion brands. He was highly coveted in like the fashion and marketing space. Yeah. But he ended up getting a call from a biotech company that wanted him, and he's like, oh, I don't think you're gonna pay me enough to like come to this biotech company. The biotech company was like, we'll give you $8 million a year. And
he's like, never mind.
And it's like, okay, let's talk. And this whole point is like, no one knew how to do marketing socially to make a brand look cool in the biotech space. And his skill set was much more valued there. So of course he went there. So I feel like the same thing is in Canada versus US. Like Canada is like 1/10 of the size of the US. Yeah. Your skill set here can only make so much money for a company, whereas like you can make 10x more in the US.
Yeah. So you already were starting to see the ceiling if you were to go to Canada.
Yeah.
right? And then like even you really couldn't get into like remote work is possible because of COVID, but it's
Yeah.
still different. Like
Mm.
you want to be where like the action is, and you got to show up at the office and like
Yeah.
talk to people. Like it's just not the same. So you saw like, okay, this is the ceiling.
Mhm.
I already see what's there. It doesn't seem that exciting, and then you're like, okay, I gotta get at
I
it.
think it's also one thing I realized, like, I want to go check out these cities. And then when you're in San Francisco, the one thing I noticed, like, when you talk to people, everyone was much more willing to, like, add on or to help you connect with someone else. Whereas in Toronto, it was a lot of, like, oh, like, he's like, Kyle, that didn't do this. Yeah, it seems really hard. Like, how are you going to do this? And it was a lot more questioning about your idea. And if you're trying to start a startup, like, there's going to be mistakes. You're going to have issues. But it's, like, getting started, that's the hardest part. And I feel like in San Francisco and I think in US, it's like, how do I help you get started so that we can learn together? Whereas, like, in Toronto, it's like, oh, I'm going to help you question it and, like, criticize it. And sometimes, like, that holds you back, right? And then that keeps, like, a feeling of not taking risks.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think in the US is much more risk tolerant.
Yeah, because I think in like, I think maybe like our friends in Toronto at that time, a lot of people are settling down.
Yeah.
People aren't moving to a new city to start a new life and to chase
Mhm.
dreams. But so if you're talking with people who are settling down, they're just like, oh, that sounds kind of,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Just like you were saying. But if you go to a place like SF or New York, like everyone has so much optimism and conviction, faith
Mm.
in what they're gonna do. So you talk to people like that, it's gonna be a different energy, right?
Yeah.
That is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, I think, a comfort level thing too. Like,
Mm.
the cities will attract people that have a similar vibe. For example, like, if you think of New York City, most of the people that move there are migrants. So they're already taking the step of, like, I'm going to move out of the comfort of my hometown and my high school, my university friends,
Yeah.
and go to this new city where I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you're in Toronto, a lot of people have, like, their high school clique, they have, like, their university clique. And, like, if they want to go meet new people, it's like, why do I need to? Because,
Yeah.
like, you have, like, your old friends.
That's
But the
it.
thing is, like, you don't get to meet new people with different perspectives, from different types of majors, from different types of dreams. Like, I went to New York City, and, like, one of the first people I met was, like, someone that was going to the fashion space and trying to open up her own fashion startup. And then within 8 months or, like, a year of opening up her startup, she was showcasing her art pieces out on New York Fashion Week. So there's just things like that where it's like, and she's like 2-3 years younger than me.
I see.
There's so much more like ambition and so much more boldness.
Yeah,
Because, like, you can make things happen there because there's so many more people.
100%. And so like you did your US tour, SFLA,
Yeah.
and then last stop was New York, I guess.
And last thought was Hawaii.
Oh,
And then
didn't get
so, like, New York City wasn't even in my my cards at the time. But when I went to Hawaii, I met with a bunch of one of my other friends was flying from New York City to Hawaii. It was like, hey, like, do you want to come and, like, share a room?
Yeah.
Right? Or, like, share a hotel. And I was like, oh, I actually want to go back to Toronto. I was in LA at this time. And then when I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? Like, screw it. Let's just go to, like, Hawaii and see how it is.
You're already out.
So we stayed there for, like, a month, and that's when I met all of her friends. And all of her friends were from New York City, and then they were, like, living life. They're also a little bit older.
Mhm.
And the more I talked to them, they were like, Quintin, you're so Brooklyn. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, what's Brooklyn vibes? And it's like, you just like have a lot of energy. You just seem like very, like, into new things and taking risks and, like, the culture. So, like, you should try New York City. I'm like, I don't know. New York City is so expensive, and, like, the rent I was
Yeah.
paying in Toronto was so much cheaper. So I went back to Toronto, and then I spent 6 months there. And then during that time, all I could think about was like, oh, I really don't like Toronto. Like, I don't like it just feels too comfortable. And the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, maybe I should go to New York City.
Uh-huh.
And then that wasn't until I started thinking, it's like, you know what? Like, what if I fly there? And at this time, I was unemployed.
Uh-huh.
I, like, quit my job when I was actually in LA just around Christmas, and I flew over to Hawaii. And during that time, I, like, just had a lot of fun, like, being unemployed, like, fun employed. And when I came back to Toronto, I, like, started to do a few startups and, like, try to, like, make my own, like, sleep gummies and the e-commerce business, started, like, a marketplace. And all of them were, like, small things that, like, ultimately I just didn't feel passionate in. So I lost a lot of motivation. And then that's when I was like, you know what? Like, I need to surround myself with people that are also trying and taking risks. And then maybe that might change my mindset.
Mm.
So I was like, you know what? Like, let's move to New York City. Like, no job, on a tourist visa. I just got myself in there. I knew I could stay for 6 months.
Mm.
So I got there. I, like, asked for sublets because you can't even, like, I couldn't even go and get a lease
Yeah,
because I didn't have a SSN. I
Yeah.
didn't have any of those things. So, like, I just went on a tourist visa, just, like, see the people. And then once I went there, I, like, fell in love, right? With the people, the energy. And then obviously there's so many things to do in New York City.
Uh-huh.
But I feel that's really the people that make it because people are so much more open. They're much more encouraging. They're also taking leaps of faith as well.
Yeah.
I think that energy is very contagious because, like, when you're in a space where you feel safe to make mistakes, you also want to go and take risks, and you're open to making mistakes. There's no shame around being bold or taking risks. So I think that's when I was like, I need to figure out how I can move here.
I see. Wait, so then like when you decided to move to New York, like I guess you didn't do like a trial run. You were just like, yo, the people I met in Hawaii from New York are fucking dope.
Yeah.
You came back to Toronto. You're like, okay, let's give Toronto one more shot.
Yeah.
Right. Let's do some stuff here. And then I guess it also doesn't help that with COVID, like people are locked down. Like you don't have the sense of community. Like a lot of that takes a lot away from you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think so many people changed their careers and like outlooks and like just their life plan during COVID, because you're like, oh, like now that all the noise is gone, like this is what I truly want. This is what I really want to do. So you went to New York without like a trial run there. You're just like, yo, fuck it, 6 months, let's go.
Because like I feel like at that point I had so much confidence moving around. Like when I got out of school, I went to like Montreal by myself. Stayed there for 2 years, and they came back to Toronto.
Like worst case, I'll just come back. Like
I'll come back. Like you have a safety net, and like I know a lot of people don't have that. But I made sure that I built up, like, I don't come from a super wealthy family either, but I made sure to always have like 6 months to like 10 months of emergency fund where I can live off of.
Yeah.
And when I quit my job, I was like, I have a year that I can live off this savings. So let me do what I can with that year. And that's why I went to New York City. It was like, it's going to be expensive, but I did the math and I was like, I could stay at this price. Like I was living with like 2 other roommates in like this small little cramped apartment where we didn't have a shared dining space in New York City.
Did you know them?
Not at all.
I just like strange. I just let it a random room, and then you
100% just trusted my friends and like the strangers there in New York City. I literally just put up a message on stories like, does anyone know anyone subletting anything in New York City? And I luckily got a friend that knew a friend that knew a friend that was moving to San Francisco for like 2 months, and I was like, and was leaving her room. So I was like, I'll take it. So I took it away from her and then paid the hefty rent price. But I think as I got that, I met more people. And then honestly, for I'd say like 6 months, I was just jumping from like sublet to sublet to sublet. I jumped sublets maybe like 6 times. I was living out of a suitcase, and because it's really hard to find like the right sublets. I was sleeping on a couch at one point with one of my friends. But I think people are just very giving in New York City, especially if you form a connection with them. So they're willing to help you and support you.
People get the grind.
Yeah, people get it.
People get how tough it is to get settled in. What was are there any like interesting memories like your first day landing there, or like, you know, because you have these expectations about New York, right? And how is like, was there anything interesting about like the first day or even the first month, or you're like, oh, we don't have in-unit laundry, or like you go into like, you know, like the local like what you call it, like the local deli, and they're like, hey, what's your order? And they're like, oh yeah, like they start yelling at you, like what are some interesting like culture shock or just, you know, stuff that you didn't expect in the first like month?
Probably the biggest thing is like how everyone's just down to like take you out to things. Like there's just one time where I think it was like my first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but the week before I met someone at like a July 4th picnic. And this was like the first week I was there, and we started like connecting, we were talking. I was like, oh, let's go dance. And like usually in Toronto, like when people say that, like let's hang out later, they usually don't follow up on it. So I was like skeptical, but then he actually followed up, and then we actually went out and like came over to my studio and we danced and we learned a TikTok, which is the funniest thing ever. And at that time he was also fun employed too, so like we were just going around like, oh, let's go like Prospect Park, let's go to like Central
People
Park.
are down to do stuff.
People are so down, and they'll like carry it out. And then the next week later he was like, oh, you want to go to a bar crawl? And we're like, oh cool, like I'm down. So we went to a bar crawl, met a bunch of like one of his high school friends and some of his other friends that he didn't even know. And they were like, oh, let's go to like 3 other bars. We went to 3 other bars, and like one of them paid for all the shots, and we're super thankful for that. And then we just kept on going around until like 2 a.m. And then we're like, oh, let's go to karaoke. It's like one of my friends having karaoke in like K-Town. Let's go. I'm like, yo, it's 2 a.m. It's my bedtime. And then they're like, it's just 8 a.m. here. Yeah, it's like it's getting started. So we went to karaoke, and then they had balls. We kept on drinking. We met like 10 other people, and just kept on going. And then at that karaoke, we met another person who then like a week later invited us out to like another dinner they were having. And it was like, people are always excited to like meet you, hear your story, invite you out, especially if you have a great time. And I was just shocked. I was like, you don't usually get this amount of like, and that person that invited us out there has been in New York City for like 5-6 years, and we're surprised like you're still trying to meet new people, because I think usually you'd be in like a clique if you're in Toronto or even San Francisco. You find your clique and then you just stay there. So I was just surprised at how friendly people were and how much they're excited to like extend you to their friend group. And that made meeting new people much more fun, and also at the end of the day, like finding your belonging clique, like finding the group of people that you actually feel comfortable and authentic around, rather than you trying to fit into this group.
That's true. Because when you constantly like that culture and being warm and welcoming and loving, like
Yeah.
so you end up meeting so many people that you can fit in with whoever you're actually authentic with, versus I guess in a lot of like if you're in your hometown, it's just like, oh, this is who I grew up with, and we don't see eye to eye anymore. They outgrown me or I outgrown them, but like they almost become like semi quasi family. It's like, you know, like we don't like I can't talk about a lot of stuff I care about with them, but these are the people that I'm gonna be sticking around with forever, pretty much. But then you can find like you can choose your people in New York. It seems like, right? Like that's really special.
Right. Yeah, and you can choose your people and for your stage of life right now. Because I do think a lot of people choose their friends, and they're honestly amazing friends in high school and university. But like, I think I moved through different life stages. For example, like a lot of my friends in university wanted to go to like the finance path, accounting and finance. And then like being with them, like they want to stick up the corporate ladder. Let's make like, you know, accountant 2 and then senior accountant 3. And then maybe we can become a director or manager in like 10 years. And I'm like, I just was not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
It felt too predictable.
Yeah.
But I think in when you go to like New York City, everyone's just much more open, jumping around to different careers or trying out different crafts.
Yeah.
Because like it's not only a financial hub, but it's a creative hub, it's a culture hub, and you get exposed to so many more things that you can feel like, you know, I'm not just an accountant, I'm also like someone that loves making pottery. And then they open a store, which I literally had a friend do, or like I'm not just a software engineer, but I'm also like in fashion design. So they started making their own do-yourself like bags out of like recycled and refurbished jeans from Levi's that he picked up from a thrift store. So it's just people just have so many more identities than just one thing and what they are at work.
You give me a peek of this when we spoke before. Like you had to decide between LASF and New York. I knew that I know some of the reasons why you didn't love SF, I guess, but like what were some of the big things why you didn't choose LASF? Because like you love to dance. I felt like LA could have been cool, right? LA's pretty artsy, but I totally get. I would also choose New York, but why did you decide New York over the?
Definitely gonna get some hot takes here, and like people are gonna disagree, but these are my preferences.
Yeah.
Personally, for San Francisco, I feel like when I was having conversations there, everyone was trying to raise something except for a kid, or like anything else that wasn't like around, or like a seed fund, or like some type of VC fund that they're having.
Everyone was trying to raise something except for a kid.
Yeah, and like I felt like everyone was so hustling that they just like thought about like work was their only thing in their sole purpose.
It's all consuming.
Yeah, it really is all consuming. And if you love that, like great for you. But it didn't speak to me. And then in LA, it was a lot about like it was actually great. I love the people there. They're very relaxed. They're very much more chill, and they're not there to like reach you and try to like see who you are, who you know. But it's very much like the parking I couldn't deal with. I couldn't deal with the driving. The fact that you're so spread apart from your friends. I am a walking person. In New York City, you can walk to places. You can take subway. If you take a subway in LA, like there's like a 1 out of 9 chance.
There's a
like,
subway in LA. I didn't even know that.
No one takes it. No one takes it, and then people are just so far away. But I do think that's something that's more about LA is like people would live like an hour out drive and would come just to see you at like 9 p.m. And I think the relationships there were like something that I really appreciated, but I just didn't like the driving because it made it so much harder to meet people.
Yeah.
And to know people in your community and neighborhood.
Yeah. It's also expensive to drive. It's like stressful. And you're just wasting like 2-3 hours.
So much time
to just see someone.
Yeah.
You could have seen them already.
Yeah.
You know, I see.
And then everyone was also like, I think there's actually this Peter Thiel like blog that talks about like cities and ambitions, like written in like 2008. But every city says something that is important in that city. So in San Francisco, what's actually really valuable there is like power. And like you wouldn't think so, but if you think about people that are like what they're trying to do there, they're trying to have companies that are like massive, like unicorns, have billions of dollars that influence many like millions of people around the world, and that's power. It's like influence to change a lifestyle or a life. In LA, it's a lot about like who you know and like, you know, your relationships. And that speaks a lot about like people ask you like, oh, I know this person. I went to high school with Hillary Duff, or I went to like university with this famous actor or whatnot. And that became a lot of the vibe that I got there.
I see.
And I think in New York City, like the one thing that I hear a lot about is like money. It's like, because you need money to do you go to all these events and like eat at these nice restaurants and Michelin star places. And I think in different places, it will speak to different things. And I just didn't vibe with like either San Francisco or LA. And even New York City, I don't necessarily vibe with, but there's definitely another voice that says what's important here is like culture. And I think that's really valuable as I went on like my next life stage, which is like really understanding culture and like media and how that influences like me and my life.
I see. Dude, that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna try to get a sublet in New York this summer. I'm trying to do like 1 month. Because the longest I've stayed was like 10 or 11 days.
Yeah.
And even that felt really good.
Can you do longer?
I mean, I could do a month and a half or
Yeah.
2. I do think I want to like, I really want to try to land some like US clients. I want to like, also I just want to live. Like I don't want to go there to just like spend a week and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be cool to just like live in New York for 2 months.
Why do you want US clients?
I think they just, I mean, obviously they pay more. That's like not straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But there's like, I think, you do the exact same, you can provide the same service,
Yeah.
and like people will value it differently based on their size, right? So it's like, it just makes sense to land bigger clients.
Especially being in New York City, like one of the biggest pieces of advice like my head of growth in my old startup gave me was like New York City is known for like advertising and brand and growth.
Yeah.
And like if you want to become and want to take your skill set to the next level, like you need to be there. Because the way that people are marketing there is just on a different level. Like there's literally new ad units in like subways where they do a full wrap of like the staircase. And it's not just like the bottom ones, it's like all around. And it's like a new dating app I've never seen. They're doing that. And it's just like one station. So it's just interesting to like go there and see.
Yeah.
So
I'm excited to come.
you need to go further. You gotta go longer. Like 1 month is too short. Like you're still a visitor at that point.
It's tough to, I think I'm kind of like, not that I'm a homebody, but I love my routine. I love like the comfort of my desk setup, even for example. Like I'm someone that like I can work anywhere out of my MacBook.
Yeah.
But like I have a PC that's a little faster. Actually a lot faster. And like I just miss that thing. Like every time I don't get to use it. And then like, I don't know, things like that I feel like are the reasons why I don't want to do too long. And I guess like I'm okay to do it gradually too. Like, if I go there for a month or 2, like I could just come back home and I could come back again for like another month or 2. Like
I would say
it's all like up in the air. Like it doesn't,
I would say that you can definitely do that, but it definitely breaks the cadence of like, because the biggest thing with visiting and actually living there is that if you're just visiting, people won't reach out to you again. But if people feel like you're living there for a longer period of time, they'll actually reach out to you. And that's where you get your connections. That's where you build like relationships. That's how you get invited to events.
That makes sense.
And if you're only there for a month, and I see you in mid month, I'm not gonna invite you.
Yeah.
Later on.
All right, peace.
Yeah, if you're staying for the summer, then it's like, oh, let's do things for the summer. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
And let's like get to know each other.
Yeah.
So I think you can do like the separate things, but it's much better to like go and like sure you have your routine, but like that's number one myth is that you can't have a routine in New York City. Just don't live in Manhattan. Manhattan is hectic. It's crazy. Like.
I only want to live in Manhattan.
No, there's so many other better places.
I love Manhattan. It's so sick. Like both of the times when we like the two out of the 4 times that we went, we were crashing at Sally's sister place.
Yeah.
And both of do you know? I think it's Bryant Park, right? They were like really close to the Bryant Park area near K-Town.
42nd.
That was nice. And then now they're actually right next to K-Town, at like 15-minute walk from like Times Square. I don't know, I just love just like being able to walk out. There's a shit ton of people, and then like everything is like so close. Like I love that. I used to hate walking, and then I love walking. But I want my first sublet to be in Manhattan, and then the next one I'm down to try like Brooklyn or something.
Well, you can jump couch to couch too.
Yeah. I feel like do you know Sydney
Bank
from Spotify?
Yeah. Hi, that's Sydney.
Sally's friend from I want to say university, but anyways, like they were chatting on Instagram, and because Sydney was posting a bunch of sublets, but for like in the winter, and then Sally's like, yo, I'm looking for like summer sublets. She's like, yo, like I got you. She's like, I knew
there are so many people that want sublet.
Yeah, I'll definitely hit you up around like I want to do April and May probably.
Yeah,
I'll see exactly, but I do think that's valid, and maybe I'll change my mind after talking to you about it, because
you have to stay at least until July 4th.
Yeah.
So you're going April,
May, June, July, 4 months.
4 months.
It's pricey. I gotta pay rent here and rent there.
You gotta do it, but like when else are you gonna do it?
You're right. But yeah, okay. So what was I saying? Yeah, I think like I really wanna give New York a shot too. How hard is it to like if someone was listening to this and they kind of feel the same way as you? They're like, I feel a little stagnant in Toronto.
Yeah.
New York. I think a lot of people want to go to New York. How hard was it to like do the visa thing, right? That's what a lot of people think about.
Yeah, it is. It honestly is difficult. There's 2 ways you can do it, but the first thing before you even think about that is just go to New York City. Like go and do the sublet, like do what you're doing, especially as like Canadians. we have like 6 months that we can go there as a tourist.
Does that
We
6 month refresh every year?
It refreshes every calendar year. So every 360 days, it refreshes.
Got it.
And they're not super strict on it, but as long as you don't feel like you're gonna like live there on a tourist visa, they're okay with you. That's really what they want to check out. So as long as you stay out of that, you're
Hella
fine.
lenient. Right?
It's a lot of the time. Like you can go there during the summer and come back during the winter and just rotate in between. Like that's one thing I thought about doing.
Could you, on your tourist visa, could you technically work as like, let's just say, a barista?
No, definitely not.
Okay,
You can't work as
can't work.
yeah, you definitely can't work. You
You can
need to
take
go
cash
there.
jobs.
Huh?
You can take cash jobs technically.
You can take certain types of jobs that are no jobs at all. I can't say anything. I can't say anything, but you shouldn't be working in the U.S. Period.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you be a contractor?
I think you can
Can
probably
you
do
work out
freelance.
of? Yeah, you can freelance. Right?
Yeah, I think you can freelance and work out of there because that's like digital nomading. A lot
Yeah.
of people do
There's
that.
no nomading. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, or you can honestly like just take a sabbatical or like quit your job. Like if you're in between jobs, like go to New York City, like live there, save enough money where you can sublet for a good amount of time in New York City. And then that's actually how I found my job, right? Which is like when I was subletting there without a job, I like met people, and then one of them was luckily enough to refer me to the job that I have now. So like you can find a lot of opportunities there in New York City, and then you can move over. But the way that I moved over was that I started doing the TN process, which is pretty much you have to be a certain profession and a certain professional. You have to have skills and experience to back it up. And then you can either get sponsored by your company or you can just do it yourself.
Were you sponsored?
I was sponsored by my company,
Okay.
and they paid for like all the legal fees and stuff. They're a large enough tech company to be able to do that.
I see.
And they were really good with the process. I think they actually got like a professor to like write me a recommendation for my role. So like if you start with a bigger tech company, like they know everything on how to get you into TN or how to get your TN visa.
Once you
So
get a
granted
TN
that.
visa, what happens then? Like the TN visa lasts for
Yeah.
how long?
It lasts for 3 years.
Okay, that's a hell
So
of
you can stay there for that time, and you can also get it renewed.
Uh-huh.
But the biggest thing is that you can't really change roles. You can't really change companies. If you change companies, you have to redo the process again. But once you get one, it's easier to get a second one.
I see.
Yeah.
But then, like, let's say if you change companies, does the next company have to help you redo it? Like, they have to sponsor you again, essentially.
Yeah, they technically have the sponsor, but when they say sponsor, like they're paying for your
I see.
the cost of you applying for your visa. And that could range anywhere from $50 if you do it at the border, like when you're about to fly and then you like go in for the interview, that costs like $50. Or you can do it in mail order, which is a little safer because it's there's a little more leniency there, but you have to pay like $2,000 or like $2,500 to do it.
So hypothetically, okay, so a TN visa lasts 3 years. Hypothetically, a year and a half in, somebody gets laid off.
Yeah.
What happens then? Like, and let's say
Yeah.
they say they can't find another job.
Yeah.
What
So
happens then?
this actually happened to one of my friends, but you end up having like a 2 or 3 month grace period. You can stay in the US. You can use that time to like look for another job or to like move things out of the US. But at that time, you have to like go and leave. Like one of my friends actually stayed longer than 3 months. I think he stayed up to like 6 to 8 months, and then he got blacklisted for like 10 years or something. So you don't want to stay or take advantage of that, but definitely like leave as soon as you can, but use that time after you get laid off to like look for a new job, like network around.
So you basically got 3 months to find the next thing. Otherwise, you're screwed.
Yeah, or you have to come back to the Canada. But hopefully by that point, like you know people in the US that can help you. Even if you go back to Canada, you can reapply. Just especially with virtual interviews, it's so much easier to get a job in the US now.
Do you feel like there's a power dynamic, employer to employee, like an extra layer because they sponsor you?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like,
Definitely have ties.
There's a lot more on the line, right?
Yeah. But that's what a lot of US employers like and don't know is that like when I was applying for a lot of places, once they heard that I needed sponsorship, they immediately thought H-1B, which is very different from TN visa. TN visa is way easier. TN visas like are generally easier and faster to apply. H-1B, you have to wait for the lottery. So only a certain amount of people from a certain country other than the US can allow people into the US.
I see.
Right? So Canada has a certain allotted amount, China has a certain allotted amount, India has a certain allotted amount.
H-1B is just like you cross your fingers, let's hope it works out. But it's a whole lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty. Some people have to go through 2 or 3 rounds, which may take like a year or 2 years.
Oh my god.
So a lot of people don't want to hire someone and wait 2 years for them to get them,
that
right?
makes no sense.
TN visa is a lot more like flexible, and once you get an offer, you can straight up go to the border and start applying.
Why would someone choose H-1B over TN?
H-1B, it doesn't matter what profession you're in, but for TN, there's only very specific professions that you need to be in, and usually it's like engineers or scientists,
Gotcha.
or like
Something
a project
technical.
manager, something technical, something that is like in the STEM field.
Yeah.
Is generally highly preferred. So like data scientists are also like highly preferred.
I see.
And sometimes they've gone a lot more strict over the years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, the power dynamic thing.
the power dynamic is very. But the thing is, like, it actually helps you too, because like that's the reason why a U.S. employer would hire you over someone in the U.S.
Yeah.
Because technically, like, why hire you?
Yeah.
Number one, they can actually pay you a little bit less.
Yeah.
Because it's USD.
And
You're
you
actually
should be
getting
very
way
happy.
more. You're gonna be way
Yeah.
happy. It's usually like, I think when I got paid, I made like a 30-40% increase in just pay.
Yep.
And then from there, you're also a higher retained employee, because you technically can't leave the company as well.
Sure, they have insurance that you're not going to want to jump around.
Exactly.
They actually prefer hiring.
Yeah.
They basically got you for 3 years. Like,
Exactly.
right.
If not for longer too, right? Especially if I
True,
go there.
they can help you renew, and that's way
Yeah.
finding a new job.
Exactly. And like I stayed there, I have my friends there. I love like the city now. So like
Mutual loyalty.
it's mutual. It's symbiotic, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
bring me to the country. I help work for them. I'm higher retained.
Yeah.
Just as good as like a lot of people in terms of talent in the U.S. And
Yeah.
it works out for both. So I really do wish that like more startups in the U.S. learn that,
Mhm.
because I do think it's like very valuable for a lot of like smaller companies that can't afford the big size of an engineer, but want to get the same talent for like a lot lower by cost.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's pretty. And then like another thing I'm curious about is like, do you think that like American working culture, what are some of the big differences you see that versus like American in general, let's just say East Coast
Yeah.
versus Canada. You feel like, I think generally speaking, people think Canadians are like a little nicer, a little less direct. And I feel like even working with my US clients, like I've had this can I talk about it? Fine. It's like this bank that I was working with, like a neobank sort of thing. And then like the two directors, like I'm on a call with them and they're just like going at each other. Like it's just so ruthless. It feels like L'Oreal again, like
Yeah.
French, like that French culture of like really confrontational.
Yeah.
And I see that in American culture too.
Yeah.
But that's just like one instance. Like I don't know if that's what you see.
Yeah. It's, I think, very industry specific. I do think of finance is super cutthroat.
Yeah.
So there's like the saying where it's like in the West Coast, people are like nice but not kind, but people in the East Coast are not nice but they're kind.
Yeah.
And it's because like they're nice to your
Yes,
face.
yes.
They actually don't mean it in the West Coast.
I think that's really true.
And I do think that's the same thing in Toronto, where like they're nice to you in person, but in reality they won't tell you what they think. But in New York City, like everyone's gonna tell you what they think.
Yeah.
And in some ways that's a lot more refreshing, because like they don't need a mask.
Yeah.
And then you also know exactly what they think. And like honestly, some people won't like you, and that's fine. There's so many people in the world like
So
that.
speaking of masking,
Yeah.
you think it's you feel like you don't need to mask as much in
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't need to, because like I think there's so many jobs there that you can pick the culture and type of like company that you will work for.
You don't have to
And also
ask yourself to fit into this mold, right?
And then I think a lot of people there also don't mask themselves, because they are like in New York City, and like the thing with New York City is that it's so much larger than a lot of these other cities like Toronto or like San Francisco, that for whatever like type of hobby or whatever craft or whatever niche, you'll find a community for that and you'll feel belonging. And once you have that, you feel much more secure about you, yourself, and your skills, that when you bring yourself to work, you don't need to like feel like you need to be accepted at work, because work isn't your only community. Like, have you ever heard of like third spaces?
Yeah.
And it's like, before it used to be like, you have your home, right, where you can be yourself, and then you can go to work, and that was like your second space, right? And then there's a little masking there. But then you have your third space, which is used to be around church, right? Which is you have your own community. But now a lot of people don't have that community, right? So they put so much pressure on home and then work. And now a lot of people with remote work have lost work in itself. So you don't have community anywhere.
Yeah.
And then if you don't feel like you have belonging and you can feel seen, being authentic in who you are, then it's very difficult. So like, I think with New York City, there's so many more third spaces you can access that you can't access in other cities, that allow you to be more comfortable and authentic in their other spaces.
That's fair.
Such as work.
Speaking of like third spaces, what are some stuff that you've like either you found belonging now, or even spaces that you've explored in the past, like essentially 2 years that you like liked, or just like whatever it is, like what are some cool things there?
One of the best ones I've been is like at work, I actually got into my ERG, which is employee resource group, and it's pretty much like an extracurricular club. But this one's specifically for like Asian API identifying people, so Asian American Pacific Islanders.
Yeah.
And there's a huge community that at Spotify, and I'm part of their steering committee where I lead the New York City office in terms of events, bringing the community together. So getting into that space has been awesome because I get to meet with other people that also want to be in community.
Literally like your dream come true, right?
It is, honestly.
Me before you were just like, yo, like I love music.
Yeah.
I think that like Asian people are underrepresented,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to do something for the Asian artist community. Like this is literally like perfect alignment. Like, you couldn't ask for anything better.
And it's like self-selection too, which is like when you go to those things, you're gonna meet other people that also want to create change in the community.
Yeah,
and that was the biggest thing that I felt like I didn't have belonging.
Like you talk to 100 people, like no, like you can't find one person that has that same idea as you. You know? What I mean?
Because there's a lot of people that want to support you and want to encourage you, but don't want to take the time to like go and make the change in your community as you want to. And I was like, I feel very lonely in that process, but like being part of that community, I met people from other ERGs from like Google, YouTube Music, and Amazon who thought the same way. We were underrepresented, but how can we change it? And not everyone in their companies think the same way. So we connect together and then we figure out how do we galvanize our community together, bring the skills into it, get people to be excited about our culture. Whereas in the media, we're told a lot of things about our culture that honestly aren't really true and not what we believe in, but it's what the West sees us as.
I see.
And I think that was like one of my biggest communities I found belonging in, which is like other people that see this, that have hot takes, that have pretty controversial opinions, but I think are opinions that we need to like discuss in an environment that feels safe and you're not going to be judged by.
What are some hot takes?
Some hot takes. I guess one that's actually pretty interesting is like a lot of people that are Asian American or Asian Canadian have this tension between like East and Western values. So for example, like in the West, it's like be independent, speak out about work, set your boundaries, state what you really think. But in the East, it's like, be quiet, like listen to your elders, be respectful, do your community, pay your dues. And they're very polarizing, where it's like one is very community focused and one is very individual focused, right? And you see this in media too. It's like US versus China, like some of the hottest things, and like the way we pit each other against it. So then when you feel like you're both, there's tension inside of you. And that causes a lot of stress because like you're one thing at home and you're one thing at work.
Yeah, and so you're like work issues. Like talk to your parents, and they're just like, oh, like they'll tell me things like, oh, that's really normal. Like like oh, you're struggling and having a really tough in your first or second or third year at your work. Like that, 100% normal.
Oh, you haven't gotten a raise or promoted for 2 years? Oh, that's fine. Just do another 3 years there. I'm like, that's unacceptable. That's not how it works, Mom. And like, it's just very different standards. And the reason why I think that is that you feel like, the media is telling you that like China is bad, right? And like, the China is like gathering up their forces and, developing technology and stealing IP from the US. Like that's going to feed into you and like, oh, like I don't like these Eastern values. I want to value these Western values. But in reality, there's always this tension. But the thing is like, we don't realize that as Asian Americans and Asian Canadians that like, we're actually the ones that mix the two together. It's like, you can be for your community and also like, make sure you protect yourself and like have best interest for yourself. Because like they're not mutually exclusive. You can do the both, right? And I think that's actually the better of both worlds. Where like I don't want to be super selfish. I want to help my community too, but I also make sure that I am emotionally and mentally safe. I'm not giving everything to my community. I'm not sacrificing everything. But at the same time, like I don't just want to do everything by myself because like I need to find a space with belonging, right? And that's why like a lot of people in the US are like lonely now. Is like they don't have a community. They don't have a sense of a place that they feel like they can express their true selves in. So I feel like that's one of the hottest takes, which is like we're told a lot that East and Western values shouldn't coexist together. But just like Asian fusion food, you can mix the two together and they're amazing, right? And like you can have Eastern and Western values. So that's like one thing that I think I really got out of New York City and being part of that community is that you don't need to choose. You can be the one that chooses both.
And then, so I know like ever since I met you, you are always like working on starting stuff. Like you love starting things. Like it feels like you have like you have a lot of ideas, which is already like I think it's a really exceptional quality about you that you keep thinking about stuff and you're like, oh, this is cool, and then like you can go from like 0 to like MVP in like like a week or something, or even like 2 days. Like you launch things really fast. You like to test things, and I know that like it seems to me like last 2 years moving to New York was like a massive thing, and then like you got like I feel like it's been really cool that you're exploring more of like things that you personally are passionate and care about. Do you still see yourself like doing things like sort of do you see yourself like still doing things on the side and wanting to start your own thing, or like has that changed? Has the perspective changed in like the past couple of years?
I think when I was younger, I used to start a lot of things that would benefit my work or my career. It's like hustling, like let me start my startup, or like let me do something I can put on my resume, or like let's volunteer so I can do this, or start like a nonprofit so I can tell people about this and I can get better opportunities.
Like for a purpose, like
for a purpose.
to an end sort of.
Yeah. And then now that I've gone to the point where like I'm really happy with where I am in my career, I don't need to do that as much. So you start expanding to like, maybe I can just start things that I really like to do.
Yeah,
so
like that party.
like that party. So like, I think one of the biggest things I learned through therapy is like your inner child. And I think a lot of people my age are going through that. But I love the saying that's like inner child, adult money. And it's like when I was younger, I was very poor and I couldn't do all these things because like my parents like we don't have money to like put food on the table. So like you can't have this toy, you can't have this sword from Power Rangers that you saw, or like, you can't get this Tamagotchi, right? So now
Elastic magazine.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I was like bring that home and like Sunday morning, like mom, like I'll do.
I want Clifford.
Just please give me one.
Give me Franklin the turtle.
They're like, no.
And it's like, I looked at that and I was like, wow, people that bought books were for rich people.
Yeah.
They'll do that. That was good.
Okay, yeah. So we're talking about the New York party.
Yeah, New York party. Yeah. So
like you're doing things for fun now, because instead of like doing it to make a little extra money, doing it to help you land the next job, you're just like, yo, what do I want to start? What do I want to do that's just fun?
And like the question I asked myself was like, what did I want to do when I was younger, but I didn't have money to do? Right. And for example, like the party that you're referencing is like me and my friend. He sent me like this TikTok about like, like doing a 200-person party or 500-person party in New York City. And he sent me, he was like, hey, do you want to do this? And it was like, what do you mean? Is like, do you want to hold a party? And I was like, dude, I don't know anything. We're not in the event business. We're like in tech. You know what? It's fun. Let's do it. And the reason why we did it was like, it feels like a challenge. He's like one of my best friends and we've always done this. And at the same time, we're like, it'd be fun to like think of a theme and hold parties. Like, I think both of us weren't really cool back in university, so we didn't go to a lot of parties or host a lot of them. And we're not cool now, but I think a lot of it is like, let's host a party that like is on our terms, like with the people that we want, with the music that we want. And to not go to like a club, which is like sometimes like it's not the right type of vibe, not the right type of people. So we're like, let's do it. And we're like thinking of themes, and we're like, what if we did a Barbie themed party where everything was pink, everyone got dressed up, and like, you know, girls love getting dressed up, and like guys are gonna be funny with all their like all the girlfriends, boyfriends, dressed up in pink and white. Like that would be really fun, and it'd also be like super unique. So we're like, yo, let's do it. So we just like started, like it was 3 months beforehand, and we're like, okay, let's do it around like Halloween timing. We didn't know how to do anything. We don't know insurances. We don't know how to find a venue. We didn't know how to like do AV. We had to talk to DJs. And then we had to like start selling tickets to our friends. And at the end of it, we like brought in a third person who like knew about decor and knew how to like actually host a proper event. And then he started doing a lot more of the finance and operations and doing the vendors, and I would do a lot more of the marketing and creating content for it, and then like selling the tickets as well. And then after 3 months, it was like this, like, also remember, this isn't like our full-time jobs. This is like our side.
Yeah.
And we ended up doing it. And we sold like 200 tickets in like 3 months, and it was like $60-$80 like USD, which is like quite a bit. And we had people from Toronto fly out for this. We had people that like heard about it and were like mentioning, it's like, oh, like, yeah, I've heard of this Barbie party. I'm like, I've just met you. Like, how do you know about this? And it was just kind of fun to like see it kind of spread in New York City. But obviously we learned a lot through that. But it was just something that we wanted to do. Was like, you know, we made mistakes. It was fun to do. Our friends could be part of it too. And now we'll always remember the time we threw like a 200 person loft warehouse Barbie party in New York City. And like we made no money from that whatsoever. I think we calculated the cost and we're like, we made maybe like $3 per hour for each person, and we worth like, I don't know, 120, 200 hours each person on that. But it was just fun. Like it's something that we would rather do, and like we brought our friends together and we have pictures from that night. So yeah, I think it's like doing more of that. And like, did that help our career at all? Like, no one's gonna care if I can host a 200 person party. But it's just something fun that I can take away as a memory.
Like doing it out of fun and love. That's like
Yeah.
having the luxury to do that is really
Yeah.
is really dope.
It's also like dealing with expectations. Like there's so many things when I was younger that I had expectations of outcomes. Like it needed to be this type of business and it needed to make this amount of revenue. And with that, it just made it feel like it was work.
Yeah.
And like the whole concept of play is like you do things without any reward. Like you have something that you're driving towards, like you're playing cops and robbers, right? You're like playing a role and like you want to like, you know, okay, cops and robbers is not a good.
No, but like, do you listen to Alan Watts?
No.
He's like this, like, I don't know how to describe it, but he was really into psychedelics. He's like a philosopher and he gave a lot of lectures. I think he's like back in the 70s, but he if you search it up, it's always like some like super like introspective music, and it's like his lectures playing, and it, but he says like the whole point of life is play, and he always talks about like when you dance, like there's no purpose, like you dance to just, you know what I mean, right? Like it's just to move, it's to dance, and it's when you play music, when you do these things, there's no purpose to, right? Like to these things, like there's no means to an end, but it's a form of play, and that's like that's what he really thinks is like the whole point. Like the point is in itself. There's no purpose to it, but the point is in itself, and and it's fun, and you're in it, and you're present, and all that. Like I think like that's really cool and rare to have.
We actually have a corporate speak for this, and like the way that people speak about it in corporate is like it's the journey, not the outcome, which is literally the same thing with play. It's like it's part of the playing rather than like what you get out of it.
You could win or lose, and it doesn't matter because it was fun.
So we've been saying it for a long time, but it's just like people don't really actually understand it.
Yeah.
So actually, a question for you, like, how have you learned how to play?
I mean, this is like this is an example. Like I said, I'm like a little burnt out from work.
Yeah.
It's my first year running my own business. And like, I think the end of the year, I just, there's more and more days where like, I'll, like after I finish work and like after dinner, I'm like, hey, like I got to go do more stuff. But like, there's no part of me that wants to do anything. Because I just like, I don't have a creative outlet. And like work is just, like I'm getting a little tired of it these days. So for me, like this is a great way where like there's no expectations.
Yeah.
Like the views that I get from posting this is fun. Yeah. You know, like I don't really need to make money from it. And like this is like a prime example. I want to find like a lot of my friends are getting into volleyball this year. I feel like volleyball is really big among Asian people.
Yeah.
Like in general. I guess it's just like
I don't even know why.
I don't know why. Maybe it's like co-ed friendly, plus like it's not super physical either.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, something like football is like it's harder to get into with like all your friends, but volleyball, like everyone can participate.
Yes.
Like it's like if you think about it, like I guess technically soccer is easier, but you need a big field. Basketball is it's harder for co-ed to mix.
Yeah.
Right. But like volleyball is really co-ed friendly.
And it's like team sports.
Yeah.
And like you need to depend on everyone. It's the communal aspect of being.
Yeah. Large groups. You can play larger groups. Anyways, like I got into volleyball a little bit last year, but I'm trying to get into a little bit.
Did you play volleyball when you were a kid or younger?
No, I was not athletic at all. Like it's like I having a dream negative game sense. Like you know what I mean?
Well, because we didn't have enough money to get into the summer camps, but they taught us how to play volleyball.
Yeah, you need like instinct. Like I have really shit game sense. Like I can learn how to like make a good basketball shot.
Yeah.
But during the game, I feel like so stupid because like I don't know where to naturally move and like reflexes and stuff like that. Wow. I don't think I'm really good at that. Something that's been really fun is like running. I used to think people who run are fucking psychopaths.
Yeah.
And then I did a half marathon in May, and like I actually love running now. And so I'm gonna do the full marathon next.
How long were you practicing for your marathon?
Well, I started training for it in February this year, and then was in May. So I had 3.5, 4 months, but it was during winter. So I had to run a lot indoors, and it sucked.
Yeah.
And even when I ran outdoors, it was like 0 to 5 degrees. It was really cold.
Damn.
And that was like the same time that like I started my business this year with my fiance. So it would be like February, it'd be like 6 p.m. and it's like 1 degrees. And then with wind chill it'd be like -2 and it's dark and we're running and training. And then I look over, I'm like, yeah, she's the one. Yeah, like it doesn't get any harder than this.
Wait, so what do you enjoy about running? Like, what about it feels like play to you? Because it seems like that seems horrible for me.
Oh,
like, okay, running in the cold.
It's hard to describe it. You feel like you can it's meditative because your mind's like, yo, I want to stop. And then you're like, no, like let's just keep going. So you fight through those cycles, and you feel like you have control over your mind over it, and you're kind of fighting with it, but then and eventually you stop thinking. Like eventually you just stop thinking and you're just running, and it's awesome because you're just lost and you're just so like you're just so in it, I guess, that you don't think about anything anymore. You're just running. You also feel very like you feel like a fucking horse. You like gallop stallion. Yeah, you feel like a stallion. It's a really cool feeling of that. You feel light. You feel fit. You feel like you have like, yeah, you feel powerful and you feel agile and like you feel healthy. Like the perfect Saturday morning for me would be to like go out at like 9 a.m. or something, and like if the weather would be like 10 degrees Celsius, like that's the perfect like running weather, 10 to 15. Like that would be my perfect Saturday morning. And then I also learned that like with running, when I used to run, I would run like 3 to 5K, and I would like put everything like I would run really fast, and you would actually die. Like you're just so dead after, you're so tired, you're so sore. And then what I realized training for the half marathon and talking to people who's done a lot of running, they're just like, yo, run like a tiny bit faster than your walking pace, but do it for like an hour. And then you're like, oh, like I did this workout and it feels good, and I'm not dead. And like, so you build like positive reinforcement into it. So eventually you can run for like an hour, and then you're actually not that tired, and then you can slowly like speed it up, and like then you get better, versus like trying to go at it for like 20 minutes and you're like, oh, like that was the worst experience ever. That's how it always was before.
You have to ease into it. It's a progressive overload when you're doing resistance training. You'll slowly get harder and harder.
Yeah. So like running is that, this podcast, volleyball. We'll see about volleyball. It's hard to fit running and volleyball in the same time.
Yeah, I'm quite a bit of like avenues for play.
Yeah, running takes so much time on the weekend. If you want to train for your marathon, you got to run for like, you got to go run a 10 or maybe a 15K or maybe even 20. And then that's going to take like quarter or a third of your day. Then you're too dead to do anything. It's like one whole day, half your weekend, you're committing to this thing. But then it's also good because like when you're physically exhausted, your mind is like really much at ease. You feel like you gave it your all, and then when you come home, you can like, you feel like the rest of the day is like so chill. Like you're just like, you're like a dog who went to like a play park, and you're just like so chill after. You know what I mean? So
rolling up in the
anyways, running has been really fun.
One thing I do feel like, it's one thing I learned about play and what people get wrong about it, and I got wrong about play too, was that like play should be easy. But like in all the things you mentioned, like play was actually hard. Like when you're learning volleyball, you didn't know how to like do it, and you had to like challenge yourself to understand the game. Or when you're running, like there's definitely mental hurdles that you need to push through.
Yeah.
And even this, like it's not easy to like learn a completely new skill of being like a podcast host and interviewer.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like with play, is like you need to actually have a little bit of heart in there to challenge yourself just enough. But also, if you fail in a safe space. Like if you fail at like one podcast episode or you ask the wrong question, like you can edit it out. Like there's a safe space.
Yeah.
Same with volleyball if it's rec league.
Yeah.
And I think having a safe space to like play is so important because it teaches you again to like make mistakes.
Yeah.
And like
having that checkpoint in the game, you know.
Checkpointing.
You died, it's all good.
Yeah, checkpoint. And like we don't have so many checkpoints in our like careers, and also especially like, I mean, we're gonna talk about being Asian a lot because like that's my history. But like being Asian, like so many of us are perfectionists, and it's because like we never had time to play. It was always so serious about like when you're going to do this homework, like you have to make sure you get an A+, or like there were so many expectations tied to like things that we did, or like if you're going to be an extracurricular club, like you're going to win.
Piano is not playing for music, it's for getting into the college.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not for the fun of music. And it's so funny because like one of my friends used to play piano, but now he recently got like a little DJ controller or like a MIDI player where you can like mini keyboard but to make music. And he hated playing piano. He played it for like 5 years or something.
Yeah.
But now that he's making music, he's sending me clips of him like making like EDM clips and music together, and he's like actually into it, but he's using his skills that he learned when he played piano to do this. So something that used to cause him so much like anxiety and stress is now so much more playful for him.
Yeah.
And he's using the skills that he learned when he was younger to like do it well too. And it's like they're actually pretty good. I was like, one of his hooks he sent me was like, wow, I could actually hear this in like Spotify.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think that's like one thing is like just finding things that are also like it doesn't need to be easy for it to be play, and also it doesn't need to be physically exhausting. Like one thing I've gotten into is like making bracelets, right?
I seen on your stories, yeah.
Yeah.
So like making jewelry and all that stuff. Like how is that?
Oh, it's been really fun. Like honestly, like you can get a bead set for like $50. You get it from Temu or you get it from Amazon, and then Like I do wire beading, so it's like I pretty much take metal wire, wrap it around, and put beads in it, and then close off the ends, and then tie it to other strings to make a pretty much a bead bracelet or like a bead necklace.
How did you even get into it? Like, it's like I don't know anybody else who's doing
Yeah.
this.
Well, like I started making my own jewelry like maybe 2 years ago when I started like making my own rings.
Uh-huh.
So it's just like I learned about wax carving. I talked to some people. I had some friends that again like showed me to people that knew what they're doing. They were like, get this equipment or go to this teacher. And I went to a workshop. And again, it's super expensive. It was like $400 for 4 classes.
Yeah.
But then after you learn the basics and learn how to use it, you're able to like make your own like rings and jewelry. Like these 2 rings I made by myself. And it was just fun. And like I don't need to be physically like I'm not the most physically fit person. So like volleyball and running is not play for me. Like I hate running. For like staying down, like crafting and doing something creative is like so much more me. So I did that, and then when it came around to my girl's birthday, like she doesn't like getting bought like expensive stuff, and we like do it yourself gifts. So I was like, oh, what if I like make like wire jewelry? And I saw this on TikTok, and I was like, oh, it seems fairly easy. I could do this.
Yeah.
And then I just bought all the equipment. I watched a ton of like YouTube videos on this from like people that were like 18 years old and like 20 years old. And I was like teenagers. It's like I was like, wow. It's like very humbling because it's like nice to be a beginner again, rather than having to be an expert all the time. So I was learning it, and I literally did it like here at the place, and I just like we literally learned, made some mistakes, and then made it for her, and then she still wears it today, and like she like loves it. But now I make it for like
Did
my
you make
friends.
that one too?
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
No, I got this from Claire's.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't make everything. Something's easier bought than making yourself. But like, yeah, it's just like play for me. It's like fun to do, and it's like very nice to have something where you can just also get into flow state. Like you lose track of time. So
I think that's like something that's because we're too addicted to like fast and cheap dopamine.
yeah,
Just like putting your phone away and like doing something in the physical world.
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't have to be physical, but a lot of times it helps. And then like it's something you can just enjoy for 3 to 4 hours. I often find myself like on the weekends, if I, like you wake up, you like maybe you say you do a workout, you eat, and you're like, oh, I have the rest of the day. And then like you watch some YouTube, and like 20 minutes in, you're like, yo, I love this. This is so fun. I'm catching on my subscriptions. And then like 20 minutes later, you're just like, oh, like this is kind of boring. Whenever you're just like lost. You don't even know what to do with your free.
And you get stuck with it so much. Like there's just so many times where like I just find myself like going for 5 minutes on TikTok to like going an hour on TikTok. And like the screen limits where it's like time limits, but I keep on finding myself, oh, it's just 50 more minutes. It
doesn't really work.
I find like myself whenever I get into a spiral, I'm like, I feel like one of those rats. I keep on going back for like the little like sugar water.
Yeah.
The drippers, and like every time like I do something hard, I'm like, oh, I gotta reward myself. So I go to the sugar water, which is like my phone, and just look at it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wow, I'm just like a rat addicted to this constant cycle.
So like one perk of creating content nowadays is that I get to like instead of like scrolling, I'll just like check my own content and see how they're doing. Like that takes like 5 minutes if you check across YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. It takes like 5 minutes to do, and then you're like, okay, cool. And then you like then I either start scrolling or I turn it off. But like sometimes when you need those like 5-minute like scrolling breaks, like I'll do that instead, and it's like a nice stuff.
Wow.
Because then you're just like, oh, like my video is doing good or it's not. Like it doesn't matter. Like I don't really care about it, but it does feel nice when it does get views.
Wow, dude. When I was
a nice substitute.
when I was doing some videos, because I try to also become a creator too on TikTok, I was like, wow, my videos aren't doing well. So how can I do better? So I looked at everyone else's. So I spent like 2 hours scrolling to be like, what are they doing better? What's going on? And I was like just trying to find all these different things. So like actually increase my screen time. And that's why I was like, wait, maybe I shouldn't do this stuff because it's like making my actual life into something that I didn't want it to be. Yeah. So I'm surprised it's different for you.
I think it's also because I'm not making content that I really expect to go viral. Like
true.
I'm cutting up these. Because when you do podcasts, you either interview really famous people.
Yeah.
And so your thumbnail is literally their face, and your headline is, it doesn't have to be anything interesting because people know who Tim Ferriss is. People know who, like, I don't know, like let's say you interview like Bad Baby. Like people know who Bad Baby is. You can put a quote of something they said, and that's enough. But then like none of us are content creators. None of us have big personal brands. So then like I also have really like low expectations. Like, this is like a big part of this for fun, and then I'll chop it up to make it as interesting as possible to someone who doesn't know us, which most people don't. And then so like I think the expectation is so low versus like if I'm trying to grow an account to 100K followers and I'm
Yeah.
trying to become like hypothetically a personal finance YouTuber,
Yeah.
then every video I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it go viral and I'm trying to get it. So like the expectation is so different there. So I can see where you're coming from. Like when you, if you're become a content creator
That's true.
from scratch, you're putting in so much work to the
Yeah.
content, whereas this like my shorts, I actually don't, it's not that much work. So then if it's not that much work, I'm like, I'm not even expecting that much. And that I guess helps.
What have you found like that is like surprisingly rewarding from what you're doing in terms of doing podcasts? Is something unexpected that you really liked or enjoyed that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things actually. Like for example, just understanding like using higher quality audio and lighting setup. Like because my agency is around paid ads, it's really like it's just really like scrappy. You don't really need any equipment. So I've been on set for like video shoots. So you see everything, but you just feel like an idiot because you don't understand anything.
Yeah.
Like you don't have a basic understanding of it, and it just feels so daunting. Now I got my foot into the door. I have a basic understanding of this, and like again, I'm a complete beginner, and it's just so fun to learn. Another thing that's interesting is like you gain an appreciation for I guess people who are podcast hosts because you realize like you have to juggle like 2 to 3 different tracks in your brain. You're trying to keep track of like what the guest is saying. You're trying to keep track of like the overall like what we talked about, and then you're trying to keep track of like what you're saying, and you're trying to add stuff, but you don't want to interrupt and you don't want to take away. Like like your brain is like working pretty hard, and that is it's cool. Like I actually enjoy it. Like it's difficult, but it's something that I can see myself getting better at slowly over time. That's been really fun. And then just even like editing, like I actually really enjoy editing. But I enjoy editing to a certain degree. Like I like editing for pacing, cutting, and then like deciding the order at which things
like the storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling aspect. And then like I have my editors from my agency who can help me with like the short stuff, which is like effects. I'm actually gonna I'm gonna learn how to do color grading. This weekend.
Color grading changes everything.
Yeah, because I really like that whole film / warm look that has been trending these days. I'm gonna try to see if I can get my podcast to look like that. It will be tough, but like I don't know, just learning these things is really fun.
Yeah.
And then just another thing that's super fun is like making thumbnails and writing making
The
like
marketing side.
making thumbnails and then like writing headlines, and then like with shorts you can edit the caption.
Yeah.
And then I realized like one of the shorts with Tuan, like it got to 2,000 views, and then like you can see the chart, right? So it's like on the x-axis is time, and then on the y-axis is views. So it literally went to 2K, and it just like flats. And I'm like, okay, like I wonder if I just change the caption if it does anything. And I changed the caption, went to like 2,100, and then like a flat line again. I changed again, and it went to 3,000 now.
Wow.
So like it's very small, but I think the YouTube algo is probably like, hey, like if they change the caption, it's almost like a different iteration of the video. Let's see if it has a better watch through rate or a better hook rate. So like things like it helps a lot because I write so many hooks for my ads that these hooks feel easier, because with your ad you have to make a hook out of nothing. Like a lot of products that you sell, sometimes there's no really interesting story because there's no human element behind it. You're crafting this artificial story, but like you have a really cool story. A lot of these guys have really cool stories, so it's so easy to say, okay, they already have this cool substantial story. I don't have to make anything up. Now I just have to frame it in a way that is really interesting and get someone's attention. That exercise is 10 times more fun than writing like ads, in my opinion. So a lot of I'm having so much fun with this. Like I look forward to doing this, and it's like it doesn't feel like work. I'm super down to like wake up and spend like 3 hours editing, and like it just feels fun.
So much of like from what you're saying, I feel like you'll go pretty long in this, because like I was talking to or I wasn't talking, but I was listening to a video from Mr. Beast, and he was saying how like the majority of YouTube people will call out to him and be like, oh, like what can I do to improve my video? And I always say the same thing is like, you've only made like 10 videos, come back to me when you made 100. And he's like, I think it was like a stat where it's like 90% of YouTubers don't even make it past like 100 videos or something.
Oh yeah.
And like he's like, do the first 100 videos and they're gonna be trash. They're gonna be so bad, but as long as you focus less on like how many views you get, but if you're improving on either editing or your sound effects or like how you're speaking or how you're telling a story in each one of those, you're going to get way better. And it's going to be a lot easier to make those videos because it's like not something that you're trying to do for some type of extrinsic reward.
Yeah.
It's something you're doing for yourself, which is like you're just learning and getting these skills way better.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're doing that a lot with like you learning editing and you learning how to like do the setup and then you being able to like juggle multiple threads when you're having an interview.
I think on that note of like it like what Mr. Beast talks about is related to the 10,000 hour rule, right? Of like you want to master something, you need 10,000 hours, stuff like that. And I feel like something that I really craved back when I was working my corporate job is like I didn't feel like an expert and I didn't feel like I was an artist. Like so much of what I did was like this like fla bullshit that's like, you know, like a marketing readout, like a monthly readout, and like putting what we did in like a pretty, like that thing didn't feel like an actual skill set, even though I know it is, but it doesn't feel like, I didn't feel like it was
You weren't making
like,
anything.
yeah, I didn't feel like I was progressing. But now like when I'm writing scripts or I'm like, you know, editing, like I know that, oh, okay, like this is like a technical skill or just a skill in general, and I can improve it and the ceiling is so high and I can like slowly get better. Like that's been really fun. Versus, you know, doing something that just is almost binary to an extent. Like, oh, I just have to do this because it's a chore. And I just have to do this because it's like, you know, it just has to be good enough to get by. Versus now I'm trying to become like the top 1% of my field, sort of thing. You know, that's been a really fun process.
I think your progress is like so much easier when you're a beginner. And then that gives you so much like that's actually a really interesting point, because I feel like a lot of times when people get stuck, when people come to me and saying like they feel stuck in the career or whatever, it's like just go and do something where you're a beginner. Like there's no stakes at all, and like you have so much to learn, and you can't tell me like there's no way you can progress. And once they go and do that, like for example, I had like a friend that was really stuck and like started doing something on the side, which is like starting doing calligraphy, right? And then as she started doing more calligraphy, she started like wanting to open up her own business for it, right? And then she like did an Etsy store, and then she started getting a few like 1-2 sales, but literally very slow over like 2 or 3 months. But then she went from like not being able to do it to learning it and then starting to sell it, and then she started doing courses on it. And then it became much more successful, and like not the ones where it's like you're gonna get like $100,000 in a year out of it, but enough where she could actually switch from her job to that, and she felt so much more fulfilled doing that. Because at work she was like being held down. She had like very like terrible manager that wasn't really responding or even listening to her, and she felt very down on herself. And then now she's doing this work where it's like still harder. She's running her own business, but because she's made so much progress in it, and she feels so much more like energy while she's like creating and also building her own business, that she's like doing so much better now, like mentally and also physically. And then she actually went back into the business and workforce now, and she just feels much lighter and much happier because now she has 2 different identities, right? Someone that's like an entrepreneur, or also someone that's a calligraphist, and now also someone that's a professional. You can bounce in between the 2.
Yeah, something goes wrong at work, you're not that fast. And then it's also nice that like once you have something on the side, I really think everyone should try freelancing. Because you take away the disproportionate amount of power that your employer has over you. Like that's really huge. Like when you're getting I don't know, like when you feel like you have to follow the orders or what your manager wants you to do and you have no other choice. I mean, like it's definitely not slavery by any chance. It's like corporate slavery, but like it's not a good feeling, right? To know that you don't have any other outs and you're forced to do something. But like the moment you have a skill set where you can freelance and you can have different sources of income, like you just create so much more opportunity for yourself. The other thing is like I think if you do your own thing, like your friend who quit their job and did that for a bit and went back, like I think a lot of the lifestyle trade-offs is worth more money than people think. You know, because a lot of times like you finish work at like on a Friday and you're like so exhausted that you go and get drunk and you do all this stuff and you spend all this money to like cope with what you're dealing with.
Like coping.
If you just feel better overall, you don't have to cope. You're also taxed a lot better. There's all these benefits. I also think about how like, I don't know how valid this is, but whatchamacallit, like back in a sort of, what's the term, like a like hunter-gatherer society, like people are almost always like sort of working for themselves. like you work at a group, but like everyone is technically a business owner, you know, like because even though you hunt in groups, like you have to contribute and like this is your hunt and whatever it is. And then eventually, even when you became farmers, like, oh, this is my farm and I farm carrots. Oh, this is like these are my pigs, these are my cows and I trade, and you have a reputation on the line and you care about these things. So I think there must be some part of like, it must be ingrained in us to want to do our own thing, and that doing your own thing to a certain degree, like owning all of that responsibility to a certain degree must be fulfilling. Like that's kind of my theory.
Yeah, there's this concept. Have you heard of like identity diversification?
No.
So like, the way I see it is like it's fulfilling not because you own it, but you own the identity around it. So diversification is about how like one thing I found crazy was when a lot of people came to me and I was mentoring a lot of younger kids, especially that were Gen Z or millennial. They were like very stressed about work, and they were like, oh, like I made this mistake in a meeting, or like I didn't present this a certain way, or like oh, I'm worried my manager's looking at me in a different light. I don't think if like this coworker likes me at all. And they were putting so much pressure on themselves to perform well at work. And what I realized is when you're young, especially when you get out of school, your only identity is like you're a worker.
Yeah.
Right. An employee at this company, and like what people tell you are like, oh, you're really good at marketing, or you're a really good engineer, or like
100% of your self-worth
is almost one identity. And that identity is not controlled by you. It's really what people say about you, right? And then that will impact how you see yourself as an engineer. As like if someone says your code is trash,
yeah,
you're gonna be like, oh, maybe I'm not a good engineer. And that will impact your entire self-esteem at work, but also outside of it.
Yeah.
Because again, your entire identity is this.
Yeah.
But as people grow older, and they can actually start like investing in other hobbies, like playing volleyball, or like, you know, becoming a creator or podcast interviewer, right? They have many more identities.
Yeah.
And your self-esteem is really tied to like the identities that you have and your perception of your identities. So you have just one identity that all your self-worth is in. It's like there's a lot of eggs in one basket, and anyone can destroy that, especially at work. Whereas like you have things where you can own your own identity, which is like pottery, or when you're doing, you know, your
you
podcast
can control.
things you can control.
Yeah.
You can have a lot more identities that have a lot more rigidity and be more robust against, you know, what people say about you. Because like I don't care if you think like my pot looks ugly.
Yeah.
It's my pot. It's my art.
Yeah.
And if I could have ownership of what I think my art looks like, I have a lot of ownership about my self-worth and how I see myself. So the more identities that you have, the more resilient you become to like, you know, weathering the storms of work and storms of like what people tell you are. And then you become much more self-confident in yourself, and you have much better self-esteem. So like I think that's like thing of being able to like, you know, have your identity at work, go outside of, find another identity, and come back to work with a different sense of self.
Yeah. I think it's a really normal thing to go through when you're fresh out of college.
Yeah.
And I think you're maybe in college as well. Like maybe it's a business school experience. I don't know if it's a common experience across other majors, but you're definitely brainwashed to think like this is the end all be all. If I don't make it a Big 4 accounting, if I don't make it a Big 5 consulting, like or CPG, your life is almost over.
Yeah.
I mean, the companies did a pretty good job marketing themselves. If you think about it the other way, right? They have so much leverage. Yeah. They make you think like they're super sick. But you look back, you're like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
I thought one of the funniest graphs I've recently seen is like this graph that I looked at all the unicorns in the US, which are like companies that are valued over $1 billion, and looked at all the entrepreneurs and their life journeys, and looked at them like whether they did an MBA, whether they moved to a new country, and whether they like went to a big 5 tech company.
They're trying to find like correlations.
Like correlations or like similarities between the journeys. One of the most funniest things is that one of the most interesting things was like, number one, a lot of the people that came over migrated to the US before starting these unicorns. So that was interesting. It's like if you made through a lot of life struggles, or you made the hard choice to move over here, that's indicative of the fact that you can probably make it through the struggles of, you know, running a company and making $1 billion. What's really funny is that later on, there's like almost no correlation between like MBAs. There's a very small number of people that had MBAs and then made $1 billion company. There's even a small correlation between people that went to a bulge bracket bank, which is like, you know, going to TD Banks or like Goldman Sachs or like Merrill Lynch, and then they ended up starting a $1 billion company. And there was even less people that went to the big 3 consulting firms like BCG and like McKinsey and had a $1 billion company. So I just find it so funny that like, there's so much value placed on going to these like name brand companies.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, entrepreneurship, or like in terms of being able to create value outside of those companies.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people have done that to the extent of like $1 billion company. So it made me place even less value on, people that have come from those companies. Because I think, as you said before, when you go to those larger companies, you get taught to do one thing, which is like to manage expectations and to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
But in terms of creating, you don't learn a lot of that. In terms of skills, there's not a lot of that.
A bit of not a hot take, but Brandon, right?
Yeah.
I guess for context, like Brandon, for the viewers, I guess, like Brandon, his like ghost kitchen at one point, I forgot the exact figures, but they were like doing really well. They had like 3 locations. They were like fulfilling orders all the time. It was a massive startup. But because I talked to him and he was just telling me like he came from like he came from investment banking and he had a lot of friends in investment banking in consulting. And he's like, I've actually tried most of them that try a startup or like try getting involved in it, like they realize, or like what he's seeing is like they have such a hard time like getting actual stuff done and like building, like the skill set really doesn't translate.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I think is also tough, because I have friends in consulting where like they hate their lives, but they're kind of stuck in the field because their skill set it's not really valuable outside of it. So they teach you how to do this one thing that's extremely valuable in this one field, and
it only works for like large companies, because like they're trying to do M&A, they're trying to do mergers, they're trying to buy large companies. They don't know how they got to the point of being a large company.
Exactly.
Like what it took.
One of like my typical spiel when I talk to new clients about my story, one of the things I talked to them about at the time when I was at L'Oreal, 2 years later. Did I tell you about Remix Snacks?
Yeah, the Remix Snacks.
Like at the time, like, so I told him like, oh, 2 years later in L'Oreal, like my parents were proud. Like I was sort of happy at my job, but like, I was just like, cool, like landed a big CPG company. And then my friend Jamie from Remix Snacks, like she started her own company. They got into Dragon's Den, they got funding, they got like a $10,000 grant from the government. She calls me and she's like, yo, James, like you're my only friend in marketing. Like I want to graduate, I want to do this full time. Like how do you you manage like $1 million marketing budget. Like, how should I grow my business? I just told like, I don't fucking know. And then that moment I was like, all right, like let me hit up Quintin and like see, like that was the big moment. I was like, oh, like I'm doing all this stuff and like the numbers look really big, but like I guess I don't really know how to do anything.
Yeah, because you do it all through agencies. You tell them what to do.
Yeah,
and it's crazy because like you're 22, 23 telling other people what to do, or like if you're in a management consulting, you're telling like these 50-year-old CEOs like how to run their business. I'm like, I don't know. Another hot take is like I feel like consulting is a huge scam. And it's a lot of like giving people reassurance or giving companies reassurance that what they're doing is like good.
Yeah,
they already know what they're doing. I've talked to so many of my friends and consultants, and it's like they spend like months on this crazy elaborate plan, only for them to say like, we looked at opportunities and other alternatives, and we're going with our plan. And they don't even take the plan that was created from the consulting company. And it's crazy to me because I just feel like there's value in it, but I don't think the value is necessarily used valuably. Yeah, or like is actually put into practice. Yeah. And then a lot of consultants actually, I like work with a lot of consultants now, and a lot of the reasons why they left is because like all their plans and strategies never got executed, and now they want to work at a startup where they can actually push that through.
Yeah, you can see things through. Yeah, have like actual ownership. You can actually execute versus just like, oh, here's what you should do. Yeah. I mean, I hope that. I mean, I don't know if it's still like that, but I do think that I really hope that that's something that can change. In the sense of like new grads having like a broader horizon and not being like tunnel vision into like this is the end all be all. I mean, I hope I do see that like I think with TikTok, like the amount of information available is so much greater. Like when we were graduating, like if you go on YouTube and you search day in the life, I don't know, as a growth marketer, you maybe like 2 videos and they're shit. You know what I mean? But like now, whatever field you want to go into, you can search on TikTok and there's like 20 people, 50, 100 people showing you, telling you the ugly
truth. The reality.
People are unhinged as fuck on TikTok, and that's really cool.
We love that.
People on YouTube, I think, are a bit more censored, I guess, relatively speaking to TikTok. TikTok is just,
anyone can be a star. Anyone can like have their opinions. Yeah. Which is good and a bad thing, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm really like, I guess I'm happy that the next like generation has has just more access to knowing versus like just being marketed to. Essentially, we were pretty much marketed to all the networking events, all the fancy stuff. They're like, yo, like this is the place to be. Don't go anywhere.
We mean
Or else you're
dream.
stuck.
It's the dream. And they started from us like when you're in high school, like in counting. That's about being a CPA or certified professional accountant, and like this is the dream. You get to like go travel places. You get to spend time on a beach.
You know, even during university, if you think back, like we would have alumni coming back to talk about their experience.
Yeah,
All that stuff was bullshit because they're still working at the company. They can't say anything real.
they're there to recruit
It's like,
people. Of course.
like tell us how good the experience was. That's basically how it was. Like they can't say anything that's bad, right? Oh, what's bad? Oh, it's a very dynamic, fast paced.
I have so much autonomy over my work and my role. I feel like I'm the owner of my business. Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Dang, actually, man, good time. So I usually do these podcasts, and there's no like planned questions, right? It's just like flowing. And then I did want to start thinking about a couple like reoccurring questions that would be interesting.
Cool.
So
Lightning round.
I have a couple, and then like they might go into tangents. So the first one is like, what's like one or two question that you wish people ask you more, or you wish that people ask you about, like things that might not normally come up in a regular conversation, but just things that you think are interesting that you want to talk about.
That's a good question.
Yeah, take your time.
I think I wish people ask more about what you're doing outside of work. Or like they ask me like, if you quit your job, like what would you do like right now? And I feel like that always like would be exciting because like, I think especially at this point when we do work, we have a much more balanced perspective of like work isn't everything we are.
Yeah.
And I think very often you ask someone like what they do to get a sense of like who they are. Like when people ask like, oh, where do you work? In some ways, it's like you're trying to label them or trying to get as much information about them, but it's like the wrong type of information that I personally don't want to see. Like, for example, when say that you work in tech, it's like you have a lot of labels that come with it. But when you ask you, like, what do I do outside of tech, that represents more of things that I'm taking my own time to go out, seek information or seek people and build with this community or work with this community. Right? Whether that's like me working in Asian ERG, I have a lot more opinions about that.
Yeah.
Or whether like I like to make jewelry, right? It's like my sense of like creativity and fashion, right?
Yeah.
And things that I'm doing now rather than what I used to do. So I wish like a lot of people ask more about like, like what would I do if I didn't have work? Because I do feel like that would be something that is
yeah. So what would you do if you quit your job today?
I think if I quit my job today, I would
say hypothetically, like the visa issue wasn't a thing. Yeah. Like that would be more fun, right? Like, because then you're forced to just find another job in 3 months. But hypothetically, you could choose to. You don't have to. Pretend visa wasn't a thing.
Yeah. I throw more parties. I actually do think that like that'd be something that I'd toy with for sure, because I think it's a great way to meet new people, but it's also fun to like think of events from like a guest experience point of view.
Like when you say you want to throw more parties, like you want to do like a mixture of fun and then maybe even like get into like art stuff or like even work stuff.
I actually want to do more intimate events. So we want to do like, for example, can we book like 4 or 5 cottages and then have everyone come there with no phones and no laptops.
Yeah.
And then you have a community where like you're living in around a lake with like 40 other different people for like 3 days on a long weekend in upstate New York City. I think that'd be really interesting. I think doing like, there used to be the things called like salons that they did back in the day where it's like women would actually get together in households and drink tea and talk about like very taboo subjects and like feminism, about their gender roles, about like just honestly even basic things such as like children and like just like more stereotypical day things. But it just created a space to like talk about taboo subjects and to ideate and to think about things. And a lot of this actually grew into movements that like caused a lot of cultural change, like the suffrage movements, right? So I think like having that, but like can we do that in a physical space? Because I feel like a lot of people talk about taboo subjects online now, which is on TikTok and in the comment section and on Reddit.
Yeah,
right. But we don't ever do it.
It's like completely demonstrated.
Yeah,
because you got to think about, okay, I don't want to get canceled. Some people want to grow their audience, and their audience is their livelihood.
Yeah.
So their opinions are skewed. But then doing it in like a no filter, no camera,
No
just
camera.
genuine, raw, like
Exactly.
that's cool.
You can make mistakes with like having certain opinions.
Yeah.
And like you can also backtrack on it, but it's so much harder to do that when you're in front of camera.
Yes.
Right. So I think creating spaces like that I think are really fun. And I think there is a need for it. Again, like the third space is a huge thought in my mind of like, how do you create that community belonging? Because like there's a whole like loneliness epidemic that's going on. And I do think a lot of it is like we're losing our spaces. Like rent is becoming more expensive. So cafes don't even want you to stay in a cafe. Like no laptops after like 2 p.m. or something. And like you can't sit around and meet people, right? Like one of the biggest things I heard that really changed my perspective on community and like loneliness is like efficiency is the enemy of connection. And it's like if you always try to be efficient and hyper productive, which is like all these productivity gurus, like you're gonna squeeze out every single inch of your minute of your time to like do things, and then you can't linger around. And when you think about connections, it's like when you're lingering around at the water cooler or in a kitchen or like, you know, in workspaces and WeWorks, right, where you're just like hanging around and you bump into someone, you're like, oh hey, like my name's XX whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's when you build connections. Or when you're lingering around like for example, when I was actually going to do jewelry making, right, I would actually start talking to people there, and like we'd hang out afterwards and just like chat about like what projects you were working on or like what's your background. Like they would come from like university where like they're actually doing a course on fashion, but they also want to do jewelry for their fashion, so like working on this. And then you'd hear and connect with these different people, and then that's how you like get to know someone like deeply. It's when you actually have time where you aren't rushing, you aren't going for something, there's no goal.
Yeah.
So I think creating all that space is so helpful, but like so much of our time is like, how do we do more with less? And that squeezes out our ability to connect with one another.
Yeah.
Because we're like, what are we trying to get out of each other? If not, like, let's not talk. Right.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And then you're trying to get efficient, and then you have like a random pocket of 5 hours, and then you doom scroll.
That's always weird, right?
Could have taken like time is really like it really does feel like I'm always short on time.
Yeah.
And then when you talk like, hey, did you catch that? Did you watch Peaky Blinders? Oh, I binged that. It's like, yeah, that was like 6 seasons. Like, where'd you find the time for that? You know?
But that's actually fine too, because then like watching those shows is how you connect with other people too.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like not putting that pressure on you is also great as well. Or like, you know, people always share memes and TikToks, and like you didn't know those memes, you wouldn't be able to like joke around with people.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think there's like space for that.
I think that's a really cool idea, and I think like it's something that I would, if you host something like that, I would genuinely want to participate.
If you move out there for 4 months.
For sure. I mean, or if you're, well, let's talk about that. But hey, like, you know, if you're thinking,
I never invite you if you don't stay over for 1 month. So
dang, gatekeeping. Has a 4-month minimum residency.
minimum 4 months.
I'm getting the Quintin visa.
I'm trying to get all my friends to move out to New York City right now.
Okay, that's really cool. I think it's funny because Kelly, right?
Yeah.
So she was we were filming an episode like earlier this week, and she was talking a lot about like having the space for a community to gather, to play, to experiment. So she's in UX design, and like, have you heard of might be butchering the name, Socratica?
Socratica, no, what's that?
Socratica? It's like a Waterloo. It's like a group started in Waterloo, and what they do is like every Sunday, you come and like 50-minute working session, 10-minute break, 50-minute working session, 10-minute break, and then it's a demo. But it's for everyone to come here and work on non-work / school stuff. Like you cannot work, and at the end you present your progress. So it's all about like showing people imperfect stuff, showing your journey, and then people connect there, and like it's like a ultra mini hackathon almost, but on the weekend, and it's like a really cool space.
Yeah.
And so she loves that, and she's getting involved with the Toronto like branch, and then she just loves like community building. She co-chaired like a hackathon back in Western, and she like participated in a lot of those, and like that's something that I feel like after talking to her, like I was really inspired, because I was like, that's never something that I had or even participated in. Like I think I had a lot of like individual connections, or even like groups of like 3 to 4 people that are on the same wavelength and we're doing stuff, but then like going out of your way to like being in a physical space and like meeting strangers and like making connections, like I can only imagine like how inspiring and like energizing that is. And so like I was really inspired by her, and I want to put myself out there and like, you know, meet more people and do stuff like that.
Try to do that from Markham. But if you're in New York City, could do that every day.
That's facts. But yeah, and then like that's actually cool because like people who live in Markham will like complain, oh, people don't want to do stuff here. But then it's like, yo, I could just post stuff and see like, yeah, there might be other like 27-year-old, 25, 30-year-old people who want to do stuff,
Especially in Markham, yeah. I do find that, yeah, especially when you have so much space to host people in a private space. You can't do that in New York City. So what's really interesting is like in New York City, a lot of people complain about like not being able to like they'll come here, they'll meet a ton of people, but they won't get deep with them.
Yeah.
And I'll ask them, like, oh, where are you hanging out with these people? And it's like, oh, we go like bars, we go out, we like have dinner and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's probably the reason why. Because like, and then they'll say about in like their hometowns of Toronto, it's like much easier for them to find like more personal bonds.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is 'cause, like there's more space in Toronto or like their
Yeah.
hometowns. So when you go back there, you can actually invite people over to your home, which is much more personal, intimate, and that changes the setting will change your conversation.
Yeah.
And if you're in a public place, you're not going to talk about like, you know, your juicy hot date or like the fact that like you had problems with your family, right? Or like what your other friends and girlfriends are trying to do
Yeah.
like in their lives, right? And they're having struggles with.
Yeah.
You're not going to talk about that in the open. But if you're in intimate setting, it creates some space for you to like talk about these more personal things and get to know about like a person's trauma or struggles or what they're dealing with. And that is where you build connection and deep bonds.
Yeah.
So I feel like in Markham, yeah, like you actually have the perfect space to host people, invite them into your home, and then have an intimate setting. Whereas like it's actually harder in New York City or even downtown when like you're literally living in a 400 square foot box.
Yeah.
So you don't want to invite people over to your really white wall, gray millennial home, you know?
That's actually so cool. I love these conversations because like you every day you like you have a certain narrative,
Right.
and you have like these concepts, and then it's rare that you like the conversation needs to get deep enough like this where it then like you get to topics where like I'm considering changing my mind about this, or like, oh, that's a really cool thing I haven't thought about and I want to think about it more. Like it's been really fun for me. It's really nice. Okay, so that was the first reoccurring question. The second reoccurring question that I had planned was like a really typical one. It's like, oh, like if you were like, you know, what advice would you give to like someone who is like, you know, 18 or 20? I'm gonna skip that one because I don't love that one unless you love it and you feel like you have really good advice to give, you know. The second one that I thought of trying out today, it's just like it's really open ended. It's just like, oh, like, you know, like, do you feel fulfilled and happy these days?
Yes.
Yeah. That's great to hear. I like that.
Thanks.
I feel like there's a lot of cool, exciting stuff. You're like moving, right? Like, and you're moving with your partner. That's super huge. Like, these are all like massive milestones, right? And you're doing a lot of like play. Like I'm just really happy to see you're doing well because you're talking about like for a while. When I was at L'Oreal, like, you know, you were just like a huge mentor for me. Like, to me, you were like, I put you on a pedestal because you were just like so ahead. You knew so much stuff. And then to me, you're like, you know how when you think your parents are invincible? I thought of you as invincible for a while. I was like, yeah, like Quintin's got to figure out like he's like, you know what I mean? And then I was like, it was like you went through your own like struggles and challenges. And it's like, it's just cool to see you like thriving and doing well. Like that's really dope.
Yeah, like I think it's interesting that you asked Fulfilled because it's less about like me getting to the place, but me bringing the place I wanted to get to down. And like, I think I started to reduce my expectations of like my life. And a lot of people like shame you on that. Like, no, you should keep your standards high, you should whatever. But like, I think there's also some point where like you can be happy with what you have. And I think I have a good balance where like I can thrive very well financially. I have a lot of freedom. I've done way better than what my parents are. Have I started a company yet? Have I made like $1 million? Have I made a unicorn? Not at all. Right. And I also don't need to. And I think it's like, rather than saying that I'm fulfilled because I got to this point, I've actually brought down to a place where I feel I should be at to feel successful. And I've gotten to what I got. And like, I don't need to do any more.
It sounds like you're not, most people move the goalpost. Like they get closer to it and then maybe they reach it, but then the moment you just move it further.
Yeah.
But you're just like, okay, let's dig a deeper hole and let's put this shit fucking down, right? Let's stop moving it and let's bring it to a place like, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what it sounds like.
I think rather than
really
digging a
hard to
deeper
do.
hole to like stay in it, because it's also like I'm not like making sure this is like where I'm going to stay for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that like I can take pride and be happy that I've made it this far. It's like hiking up a mountain and looking back, and like the view is way better looking backwards at where you've come from rather than at the ground in front of you when you see the peak, right? And it's very fulfilling to look back and be like, wow, I've climbed like this far. And I think a lot of people don't look back because they're always focused on what is the next step, what is the next step, what is the next step.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a lot about like feeling fulfilled in the moment, and that can be great. And like just know that if you want to strive for more, you're actively telling yourself that you're going to be unhappy, right? Because if you actually if you actually, get to where you are, like you're going to be happy, you're going to be successful, you're going to be fulfilled. But if you move that goalpost, there's a gap in between you and where you want to be.
Yeah.
So you're technically unhappy, right?
Yeah.
So just know that like you're choosing to be unhappy, and is that worth the trade-off? So for me, like I want to be fulfilled, I want to be at peace right now because like there's a lot of changes going on. I'm going between New York City and Toronto.
Yeah.
Like like can I create my own peace right now? Where it's like, do I need to do other stuff? Like no, I don't need to pursue in my career. I don't need to like get hired, get an next promotion. Do I need to like start a new startup that's gonna like, capitalize on the AI wave right now? Not necessarily. And I think that way makes me a lot more fulfilled, and I just have so much more control over like my happiness rather than other people telling me where to set my expectations or where my goals are, which I think when I was younger, like my parents did and told me like, you have to get into this university, you have to get into this work. Or like my friends were like, oh man, like I got into like this type of bank, like where are you at right now? What type of startup or where you are? I think once you lose a lot of those like social expectations too, so much easier for you to control when you're fulfilled or not.
Yeah, like living for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that something I think those are a couple lessons I took away visiting Korea. Because East Asian societies like Korea and China, just hyper competitive, and then you live for other people. Your appearance is like how you're treated. Like you're treated with respect if you dress well and you look nice and you have great skin. But if you dress like a bum, like you're not getting good customer service. And like, it's like a lot of like seeing the extreme end of that makes me realize like the stuff that was going on for. And you talked about like looking back on the hike and like appreciating. I relate to that a lot because right now when people ask me how my business is, I'm like, well, like, what if I look back, I feel awesome. Like I'm really proud of what I achieved. But most of the time, the day-to-day, I'm looking forward and I'm really stressed and I feel really busy. And I feel like it's just like the day-to-day is like, depending on the day, it's really tough or it's good, but it's like some days are really tough. But I try to look back and like appreciate and be grateful for things a bit more. But I am having a lot of trouble with it. So it's really inspiring to hear that like I think that goalpost is one of the hardest. It's one of the hardest things to do is to move it like closer to you versus further from you. Because I always think that apathy is tied really closely to like compassion, like kindness to yourself and compassion and gratefulness and all those positive things. I always felt like it was on the other side of the same coin as apathy. But then growing up, like these days, going through like therapy and everything, I'm like, okay, that's actually separate. Like you can, once you let go, you can actually like, in a weird way, you can still care. You can even care more. But instead of being fueled by the negative stuff, which is like, I'm not there yet. But like being fueled by the positive, oh, I'm really grateful. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
I've come really far. Like, let's see what's next sort of thing. So, but I understand, but it's hard to put it in practice.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy to hear that like you're doing well.
Yeah. I think that's like crazy because I do think that that's where your friends come in, right? Because like you're always like on this hike, but your friends are around you and like they're telling you like how it is from the bottom because they haven't made the hike that you have. And I'm like, James, you've actually gone so far. The fact that you started your own agency and like you built it up and now you have editors and you created this business is really very like I'm very like excited for you and also very proud of what you've done just because you've broken off from like the stereotypical path of like going through tech startups and jumping from tech startup to tech startup, getting a bigger salary. You've just like, screw it, I just did one, I've learned enough, and I'm going to take my skills to something where I want to own myself. And I think that's like a lot of risk, a lot of responsibility. Yeah, and then you have a team now, right? And above that, you're also like not putting your entire identity and your entire focus on that. You're learning to branch out to all these other things, which I think is so much more healthy and much more well balanced.
Yeah,
And
trying to
like
be a lifestyle business owner.
a lifestyle business.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like I want
Yeah.
to live a good life instead of
Yeah.
trying to make every buck possible.
Yeah,
But that's hard to fight against your Asian instincts. Your Asian instincts tells you to make every buck possible at whatever
Yeah.
cost. That's the instinct in me, is like take everything off.
which is great, and that's exactly what we talked about. Which is like
Yeah.
it's great in circumstances,
Yeah.
but you have to. It's maladaptive.
Exactly.
Use it in circumstances that aren't what you want it to be, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Okay. All right, I think that's a wrap. This is
the wrap.
this was really fun. I really
Same.
appreciate like just like I know you're like when you come back to Toronto, you have like so many people to see and stuff like that.
Lots of parties to hold too. So like,
Yeah.
but it's always good to catch
Especially
up with.
holiday season, it's like you want to rest, but it's actually low-key chaotic.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for inviting me on.